Well, hello. I am George Stevens, and one of my incarnations was the founder of the American Film Institute, and I'm a filmmaker, and I've been invited to really have the honor to have a little conversation with Bradley Cooper, and I would simply say of him, as I was just saying when we met, it is hard to believe that this is a film by a first-time director and co-screenwriter, and it's just, I think, such a wonderful accomplishment, and bold and beautiful. So we are here, and we will talk.
Thank you.
Turn on the lights.
I had a little quote on this paper that I can't see in the dark, but I can ad-lib it. And the choice is coincidental. But Leonard Bernstein spoke brilliantly about creativity. And he talked about the complicated circuitry of the human brain, and that sometimes there's a short circuit, and interweaving strands come together, and there comes an idea. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you if you remember when you first had the notion of telling this story on the screen.
Yeah, I remember when the strands collided.
Oh.
First of all, thank you. What an honor to be sitting next to you. And I love DC. I love being here. So this is a real thrill. This is the first city I'm going to around the country, just to talk to people and show them the movie. And I got to do this with Silver Linings Playbook, and it was the most nourishing aspect of promoting a movie, was just going around this various cities of this country and talking to people who are willing to sit through the movie and talk to me. So it's really, it's very educational for me. It was about 7 years ago, and I was like,
yeah. There is an audience.
Oh, there's still people here. Yeah, good.
We are here.
And I was lucky enough to be backstage at a Metallica concert in Yankee Stadium. I had met Lars Ulrich, and I listened to Metallica when I was 14 years old, and I loved Ride the Lightning, and that's why he says that in Silver Linings Playbook. Anyway. So I was behind the drum kit, and I could see the sweat on the back of Lars's neck, but at the same time I could see the scope of Yankee Stadium in front of him, and it was a beautiful proscenium, and that was the first moment where an idea came, and I thought, oh, I've never seen that on film. The subjective eye of being able to be, that could actually be epic and personal at the same time. And that was the beginning of the idea of how I wanted to shoot all of the concert sequences that you just saw, which was all subjective. We never left the stage, but hopefully you felt the scope of where they were.
Yeah. And you saw the people in the audience.
Yeah.
Working. I mean, again, I'm not here to review the film, but I just love the sensitivity of the performances. I mean, obviously, Gaga is just remarkable and so true. And I wonder, you've done so much work in front of the camera, that how you developed your way of working with actors, and just how did you, what gave you those instincts?
It's exactly what you just said. I had the luxury of having done work so often in front of the camera and on stage, and so I knew what I needed as an actor in order to feel comfortable enough, because as Al Pacino said in some interview, you're just trying to grab that one moment or few moments of authenticity. That's all we're trying to do for the camera, to capture it. And it's important to create a space. To me, I want all the actors to feel completely safe, but also to know that it's going to cost a little bit. It's going to be hard. They're going to have to go to a place that's going to scare them. But they're going to know that I'm there. I'm just right there with them. I'm not on the sidelines. I'm actually right there with them, and it's going to be okay. And it's going to be okay to fail. But we have to risk. We all have to risk, because I have no desire for you to sit here and watch something that doesn't mean that isn't very personal to me. It's a huge honor to be able to show you this movie. It means a lot to me because it's you're giving your time for something that I've created that I want to share with you, and I hope that you will feel the way I feel from it, which is healing. And that's the same sort of thing, type of discussion I would have with every actor when I would ask them to come do this film. And I think that they really felt that trust. And everybody really wants to express the deepest part of themselves, don't they, to another human being, and feel safe to do that. It's a very cathartic experience. Yeah. So it was just important to me that the set had that feeling from everybody in the crew. Everybody had to know the world with which we were dwelling in order to try to catch those authentic moments.
And so for many directors, the editing room is a place where you can do so much work to make the film work, really. And I'm interested in your experience there. Did you feel you had a lot to do in the editing room? And
I have to say that, so I moved out to Los Angeles in 2001, and I was on a television show, and I was completely depressed, and I was working 3 days, and I love the East Coast, but I loved the idea of how to tell a story through the lens. So I would sit in the editing rooms at that show for like 2 years, and I was fascinated. And then I've had the opportunity of being in the editing room for a lot of the movies I've been in for the whole stretch of the editing, not like a couple days, but for 6 months. So, and I learned that I felt like I have a real knack for editing, and I love editing. It's the most gratifying part of making a movie. You kind of just want to rush through writing, which is the hardest thing, and then just rush through the shooting so you can get in that editing room, right? It's where you create the story. So that was, because I had all that experience, we only shot this movie in 42 days, which is not a lot of time at all. And I knew, I had instincts about things I knew I would want to play with in the editing room, and my instincts were right, and a lot of little things that I wanted to get wound up being invaluable, and we didn't do any reshoots on the movie. But yes, I absolutely love it. Because all we're doing, a movie is rhythm. It's one musical element, that's it. And it's in the editing room where you're composing that musical piece.
Yeah, and the kind of thrill of a tiny little refinement in the editing, and something that's seen as kind of playing there, and you've looked at it, and all of a sudden you do two little things. And
oh, it's amazing, isn't it? It's just the greatest feeling in the world. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it really is. Like, oh yeah, no, it doesn't have to walk out the door; it just goes. Yeah, I learned this from David O. Russell at the end of it, because you go deep in the rabbit hole when you edit too. You can mine for hours and you come up with nothing, but at least you learn what doesn't work. But David O. Russell would have this thing that we would do in the film I did, which is at the end of every day we'd watch a little candy. So stuff that did work, we would let's just watch that, so we know this is not a complete fool's errand. Yeah. So we would watch that in Northern California when he brings her on stage. That was one of the first things that really pieced together great.
Well, that's such a remarkable scene, and I read and was fascinated when I sat here this afternoon and saw it, of this. Sometimes just an idea can mean so much to a film, and about how you landed on the song La Vie en Rose. I mean, it so puts the picture in motion. Did you talk about that a little?
Sure. You're right, because the idea strikes, and then it's what do you do with that idea? How could it fit into the story? How could it illuminate the characters for the viewer? And it was the first time I had ever heard Lady Gaga sing. I was at a cancer benefit, and it was the last performance, and she came out and did a cover of La Vie en Rose, and it just absolutely decimated the place. Everybody was speechless. And I thought, well, she's got to do the role, and I met her the next day, but I knew that has to be in the movie, because not only is it incredible what she did, but I know how I felt, and that's how that character has to feel. So what a perfect thing, so I didn't have to act. But then so you have this idea, and then what can we do with this idea? Here's a woman who's 31 years old. She's not an ingenue. She's bitter. she's in a business where men have told her that she's not pretty, and so what does she do? And she's a songwriter, but so what is she doing? She's singing a cover when we meet her. But even in singing the cover, she can't hide the magic that's within her. So it wound up being a perfect story point, that song.
And beautifully done, the scene, just really remarkable. I'll take just a little personal privilege as in my one-time role as founder of the American Film Institute. Your cinematographer, Matt Lebeek, and Jay Cassidy, the film editor, are both AFI graduates.
Yes, they are.
Yep. Yeah. So we like that. Applause.
Jay Cassidy, who has been nominated, I think 3 times. He was nominated for the Indian Runner. Was I think that was the first time I was aware of him. He edited all of Sean Penn's movies after Indian Runner. I think that was Sean's first movie. And then I met him on Silver Linings Playbook, and then we edited American Hustle and Joy, and we really he's incredible. And Matthew Lebatique is Darren Aronofsky. They collaborated. They went to school together. He did every movie except The Wrestler, I believe. And he was just incredible to work with. Yeah. Along with, I also have to say, your camera operator is one of the most important people. And Scott Sakamoto, I had the great honor of working with Scott Sakamoto, who is the greatest camera person alive.
And I understand with those big concert things, you didn't have a lot of time.
No, we shot the opening in that movie in 8 minutes. We jumped on, because the other thing, I knew that I had Lady Gaga, and she's the real deal, and the whole movie had to come up to her level, otherwise you were never going to believe it. So I spent 3 years in befriending some great musicians and following them and just learning everything, but I also knew that because I wanted to shoot from the stage, it just had to feel real. So we jumped on real stages. That was Stagecoach. Jamie Johnson and Willie Nelson gave us 8 minutes in between their sets, and that's Glastonbury, England, which is the crossroads for a musician if they could play in the Pyramid stage. And I go there every year for the last 6 years. And Nick and Emily, who own the festival, it's the largest privately owned music festival in the world. And Chris Christopherson happened to be playing last summer. And he was on set, and his wife was telling us that I was desperately trying to find a musician who would give me any minutes on the Pyramid stage for that summer. And she said, yeah, of course. So Maddie, myself, and Steve Moore, the sound guy, we flew to London, went to Glastonbury, and for 4 minutes I did that song. And then I got to say, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Christopherson. It was insane. It was insane.
And you didn't take a whole army?
Oh no, it was 3 of us. Yeah, and then Robbie, a producer as well. Yeah, that was very bare bones, yeah.
Could you talk just a little bit about the musical, how the musical concept developed?
Again, this idea, love story, as I wanted to do something very personal, and how can I access myself personally? Well, song really is the thing. If any one of you had to come right up here and sing, you'd probably be terrified, number one, because you'd have to really reveal all of yourself. I'm not going to sing right now. And that's a beautiful thing. And to have 2 people singing together, and it's story, it's not just sort of a break in an interlude. I mean, there's not one lyric that doesn't have something to do with why the person that's saying it, or the person that's receiving it, or a moment in the movie. So it just felt like the greatest vehicle with which to tell this story. And that was a huge endeavor, but one that was wonderful, and I got to meet incredible people along the way. But yeah, we sang everything you heard, we sang live. That's all. That was happening.
That's wonderful. I was thinking, it's a certain amount of chutzpah to say, well, I think my first film, I'm going to make A Star is Born, which has been made 3 times. And I will say, for my taste, this is the one. But his predecessors in that work, this is who you were putting yourself up against: William Weldon, David O. Selznick, Dorothy Parker, Bud Schulberg, Ring Lardner, Janet Gaynor, Frederick March, George Cukor, Moss Hart, Judy Garland, James Mason, Frank Pearson, Joan Didion, John Dunn, and Chris Christopherson, and Barbara Streisand. And they met their match.
Well, thank you.
Questions from the audience? Yes. Did someone have a question? How about, yes, sir.
Were you playing guitar during those musical performances?
Yeah, the acoustic stuff I'm playing, and you hear it for some of the stuff. I'm always playing the guitar, but I dubbed over Lucas Nelson playing the same thing because I wouldn't have sounded like that. That he's an incredible guitarist, and I heard him on Desert. I went to Desert Trip, you know that it's like they call it Old Cella, and he was playing with Neil Young. And I love Neil, and I wanted Neil Young's. I kept hearing that muscular attack on the guitar. That's what I wanted Jackson's sound to be. And I found myself looking at the Jumbotron on either side of the stage and not looking at Neil, but looking at this young guy playing the guitar. So I asked if I could meet him, and we just started playing in my basement of my house. This is like 3 years ago. And I told him this crazy idea, and then he wound up, his band is Jack's band, Promise for the Real, with Lucas Nelson. And we wound up making music together, and I wrote and arranged that song, and the first song that you hear, we played it together, and it was just incredible. But that guitar solo, I would sort of sing it to him, and then he would play it as we were composing it. It was really wonderful. And the fact that they treated me like a peer, that's really what gave me the confidence to do this. Lady Gaga and Lucas really embraced me as a musician, and they certainly didn't have to do that, but they encouraged me to really try to create this character and do it, and I wouldn't have been able to do it without the both of them, for sure.
I read a beautiful quote of Lady Gaga saying that the first time she heard Bradley sing, she realized that he had the soul of a singer and a beautiful voice, and so that must have been a wonderful moment when you two realized you wanted to work together.
It really was an incredible moment. It was that moment. It was that next day after I heard her song, and I went to her house. Really? And I don't even know. I had this idea. Midnight Special is this song that I always loved.
You just drove down the street and rang the doorbell.
Yeah, that's how it works. Went down into the tunnel and then took a helicopter to the thing at the top of the mountain. No, I just called her agent, and then he spoke to her. But I noticed there was a white piano in her living room, and then about 10 minutes in, I said, "Well, I have this song." And she didn't know it, and she said, "Well, let me print out the sheet music. And can we play it? Because if this doesn't work, then there's no movie." And we did it, and something kind of magical happened. It was really crazy.
Oh, that's remarkable.
Thank you.
I have it on my phone if you want to see it.
Lady, yes. I'm talking to you. Why don't you stand up, if you would, please?
This might be kind of hard for you to think of the exact one, but what was your most favorite scene that you filmed, and what made it so special?
I couldn't really answer that honestly to one scene. That was the thing about this movie. I have to say, everybody. There's not one moment in this movie that I see anything that's not truthful. And that's the thing I guaranteed to all the actors. I said, one thing, the movie might not be good, but one thing, no one will catch you acting. I promise you. So because of that, there were a lot of wonderful things that happened. I mean, one thing that just came to mind when you said that is the bathtub scene with Jackson and Allie. That was incredible, and it was heartbreaking. When I told her those things, it was horrible. But we were creating together, and it was we were kind to each other in between takes. But that was tough and beautiful at the same time. That's kind of the great thing about storytelling or creating art. You could take all that dark, shameful stuff within yourself, and you use it to tell a story, and it's cathartic and hopefully healing. The scene between Jackson and Bobby, his brother, when he's driving him home from rehab. I knew that when we did the table read to that scene, when we got to it, I actually couldn't even say the lines. Yeah. And so I thought, oh, this is going to be hard to shoot. And I really couldn't. I mean, I just was. Yeah, it was. I wouldn't have been able to film that. That would have been horrible. But I really was very. So it was an emotional. We knew it was, and so I decided to shoot it in a way that I got in the car. He picked me up someplace, and then we drove. And we drove for about 10 minutes until we got to Jack's house, and that was the whole take. So that we weren't just arriving, okay, back up 10 feet and now you're arriving. So we really got to feel that experience of two brothers, him driving his younger brother home from rehab. And that, what's in the movie is the first take.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to put 2 cameras in the back of the truck so that when Jackson got out, Maddie would duck down, and then the B camera had the back of Sam, because I knew Sam was going to pull out, and it worked out perfectly. And that again is rhythm. I just love the two people that can't talk to each other, and then a door closes, and then a gear shift. He doesn't get out of the truck, he drives away. And I love the rhythm of that scene.
And how difficult was it for you? Obviously, you mastered it, but you're acting in emotional scenes, and you have to have your director's eye somewhere in your head. How did you balance those two things?
I have to say oddly enough, that was kind of cheating as an actor. I learned that on The Elephant Man. I did a play of The Elephant Man, and there were so many physical things to work on for Joseph Merrick. All of the melodies, that the emotional life, I wasn't thinking about, because I was focused on so many other things that it just happened. And that's all you try to do as an actor, right, is turn your brain off.
Yeah.
So being a director served me as an actor in a huge way, because I was obviously thinking about the other actor more than me, because I'm trying to get the performance out of them.
Yeah.
But so the last thing I was thinking about was me, and so it all just sort of happened. But that said, I had spent months and months just getting Jack down. So I had Jack, I logged that away, and I said, okay, now I can focus on everything else. But if I hadn't done all of that work on that character, then I would have been in trouble.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So if we'd seen the Judy Garland one, we remember James Mason going out in the waves, and we knew your character's doomed. But so what I want to commend you on is, especially as a first-time director, how you set up those fatalistic images early on. You see, when we first see you, we see the neon nooses behind you, and how important was it to drop those fatalistic things in there, knowing the outcome? And are there any that we missed that we were so grossed in the story? Were you planning any others?
I mean, that's the thing about when you give something away after you create it. It belongs to you, and it's for you to say. I'm glad you saw that. We found this location. I'll tell you exactly how it happened, and I just went for a walk around the block, and I looked up and I saw this billboard, and I went, whoa, come on. And I said, no, we only had a little part of the street blocked off, so it was like illegal not. And I said, no, we got to go around because I want to stop. So for me, here's an idea, and then you make it fit into the story. Yeah. It's the place that he makes a right turn too. So he doesn't know that he's heading towards his death. He doesn't keep going there. That's where he says, how about over here, right? So he's going towards the nooses. And so that I just kind of loved that of it.
It's kind of the most valuable lesson I learned early in my life from my father, who was a great film director, was respect for the audience. And you see, there's a member of the audience, they're out there bringing all their imagination and their life experience, and when you say that you promise the actors they wouldn't be caught acting, that's a sensitive director. He's not going to have them doing more because he thinks you may not get it. He's going to trust you to see in Lady Gaga's eyes, without her making any histrionics, just there, and maybe a little music in the distance, and you guys will figure it out, right? Yeah. Yes.
So to go along with that theme of not catching the actors acting, how exactly did you capture those gritty, realistic on-stage moments? Because it kind of reminded me of Game of Thrones when you're in those battle scenes and it's like the one-on-one person's perspective. You really executed that so well. How did you accomplish that?
Thank you. I love Game of Thrones. That's a huge compliment. Wow, no, stop. This is too much. The next season, are we psyched? And so I wanted a scene like that, but coming at it from a completely different perspective, from where Jackson is. And Jackson, she put that on herself at the end for Let Me In, Rose, and he's almost looking at in wonderment just at the discovery of it. So I liked sort of creating the same structure, but what happens if you put two different characters in that, but are doing the same action?
Thank you.
That they're saying how much the entertainment industry is changing, and there's no doubt about it. But this afternoon, sitting in this theater with that big screen and the great sound, is just, you know, a reminder that there will always be a place for beautifully made films on a big screen where you have the experience with others. And certainly you've hit the mark with that.
Oh, thank you.
Maybe one more question. I know if you, yes. How about way in the very back? It better be a good question. Flip a coin. The person in the cap.
All right. First off,
we got to do both of them.
Both, yes.
First off, go Birds. So, in the wake of the recent death of Mac Miller, I think this movie kind of connects to me as far as showing from a celebrity standpoint. That kind of put me in the perspective that's, you know, addiction, depression, all those things that go into it. And then also from the standpoint of fans just being all up in you and trying to take pictures. Is there anything that inspired you as far as from a celebrity standpoint, because you are a celebrity, that made you feel like you needed to include that in the story?
The thing that I love about movies as a kid is I could watch The Natural and Roy Hobbs and Robert Redford up there playing this larger-than-life character, yet somehow I'm relating to him. And how did that filmmaker, how did they do that? This story could be any one of our stories. These two characters, what they've gone through, a traumatic situation in his childhood, he's never grown from that moment. She's living in a world where people are telling her certain things, so she feels this way about herself. I think that these are things that all of us can relate to. So it was just about creating that real dynamic, but then making it cinematic by having it be these two characters that are almost larger than life. That's what influenced this idea of making them big. And so celebrity came with that, and you know, there's not one scene where anybody's taking his photograph in terms of like a crowd with paparazzi following them and all that kind of stuff. I didn't have any. That doesn't teach me anything. I could watch TMZ and see that, but that doesn't allow me any sort of insight what fame could bring. When I think about my experience of fame, I always think about the sound of it. And the sound of it is a cacophony of noise and then silence. It's like, and that's the beginning of the movie. You know, you're in this place, there's tons of, it's everywhere, and then all of a sudden, you're by yourself. And that, the sonic element of fame is what I really wanted to capture. And that's actually throughout the whole movie. There's this like noise, energy, and then quiet and solitude. So that's how I approached that idea.
Which parenthetically happens to be a very good device in storytelling.
Yes.
The alternation of one condition against another.
Oh yeah, and rhythmically it's heaven.
Yeah, it really serves the story. Yeah. And I just felt that you got, you know, I wasn't knowing what to expect, and I just felt how you got the story going, and I became confident that it.
Sure.
Okay. Do you have a sense of how you're going to divide your time or balance your time between your acting life and your storyteller, I mean, the behind-the-scenes camera director life?
You know, I was 39, I think, when I started. I finished this play I was doing, and then I haven't done anything else but this movie. And it's because as I was hitting 40, I realized time is the biggest currency. And I knew I always wanted to do something. And once I found a story I wanted to tell, I said I'm going to do everything I can to do it, because, I don't know, you know, time is precious. I've never felt more artistically fulfilled doing this. So the truth is, you know, I would like to just only do this if people will allow me to, as long as I have a story to tell.
That's great. But I will look forward to it. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.